Who does the business development for your organization? Should the CEO devote time and energy to something as simple as business development? Should the CEO lead by example? Well, after today's discussion, you'll have a better understanding why CEOs need to excel in business development. I'm Linda Katz-Wilner, founder and CEO of Successfully Speaking, and today my guest is John Dinkel. John is the founder and CEO of Dinkel Business Development. Welcome, John. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. It's really good seeing you. Appreciate being here.
Sure. And John, why don't we start off with the basics? What is BD or business development?
Great question. I get asked that a lot because I think there's probably 100 different answers for that. But the way I would describe business development is it's when a person builds relationships with prospects and referral partners and clients for that matter to increase long-term brand recognition, increase deal flow, top of the funnel leads, and develop strategic alliances with organizations to drive lead generation.
Okay. And so is it the same as marketing?
No, marketing, I think is more brand awareness, and putting your name out there and your brand out to the marketplace. And what I would consider kind of inbound lead generation is a lot of what marketing does, whereas business development really more focuses on outbound lead generation and relationship marketing. I think the big confusion for a lot of people is business development and sales. Because a
Mhm.
lot of companies will say they hire a business development person, but they're
Mhm.
actually a salesperson. So the kind I find more the kind of the confusion there. So when on the sales side, that's when a person kind of takes a top of the funnel lead, works it through the sales process to close. It's like cradle to grave.
Mhm.
And top of the funnel meaning there's a pool of potential customers out there to top of that funnel lead and someone that you're targeting, and they've reached out, there's interest there, and you're basically taking them through the sales process from prospecting to qualifying to needs analysis all the way to close. Whereas business development is all about building relationships with your prospects, partners, building your brand out there in the marketplace and things like that. So I think there is like a confusion there with a lot of people. And I often when clients come to me or friends come to me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about hiring a business development person," and I say, "Well, talk to me about that because how would you define a business development?" And they describe a salesperson.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Now, CEOs, as we both know, are very busy and have so
yeah,
much on their plate. Why is it important for the CEO to excel in business development?
yeah. There's a lot of reasons, Linda. I appreciate you asking the question. So one I would say is in a lot of cases, the business owner, the CEO is the only one that can get access, to other CEOs and business owners and and have those high level discussions. When I was at the BBJ, as the publisher, my role was to be the face of the organization and meet other business owners, meet CEOs, meet the folks that were leading the law firms, all those things, and learn about what's happening in the business community, make sure that we were covering the right topics editorially. But that, of course, put me in a position where I could talk to them also about marketing. I talked to them about a lot of other things. And those led to, meetings that then I could introduce them to the account executive. So I think, there are a lot of cases and there's a lot of great salespeople out there, a lot of great business development people. And I think it can be a lot shorter of a time for the CEO to have that conversation first and then kind of pass it down. So that's one really good reason,
Mhm.
especially from the lead generation side. I think it shows their team that no matter how large or small the company is, that man, they are out there with everyone else supporting the
Mhm.
business. They're bringing in relationships, they're nurturing relationships, so that the company can be successful. So I think that's kind of a lead by example
Mhm.
way, and it also could be highly beneficial from a kind of branding perspective and just overall brand awareness. You know, Business development isn't just about getting out there and networking. It's about building relationships through a lot of different things like referrals and centers of influence and creating partnerships with strategic alliances, all those things. And if you think about, the CEO is and the business owners, many times they're in good positions to participate on panel discussions and
Mhm.
keynotes and things like
Mhm.
that, right?
So, how are they going to then encourage company wide business development practices? It's great that they're going out and doing it, but they still want the company to do it, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's kind of building that culture of business development, which I love talking about because it's based on the premise that everyone on their team, no matter where they sit in the organization, if they're on the administrative side, if they're on the tech side, sales side, obviously, but everyone has a network, and there are three, kind of basic networks that everybody has. It's your personal, your social, and your professional. And the
Mhm.
challenge is how can we get more of our employees to kind of tap into those networks and bring more relationships into the company. So I hear a lot about this, especially from CEOs that want their executive teams out there a lot more. They feel as the CEO, man, we're as a team and as the executive team, we're running the organization, but it's kind of on them to like build the relationships. So I hear a lot that, hey, I want my CFO out there. I want my COO out there. I want my CTO out there, um, and the challenge again is, how can we empower them to get out there and do more of that? The best way is through, what I would call like a business development kind of culture plan. And there's four steps to that. Simply one is, setting your overall objectives for that. What are the priorities of this, business development culture? Is it overall growth of the organization? Is it increasing employee engagement? Is it increasing the number of referrals you're getting into the sales team? It could be all three of those things.
Mhm.
Um, the second thing is to develop a communication plan, both internally and externally. So, internally, how are we rolling this out? Who's involved? Who's leading? The project. It has to come from the top down. Something like this.
Mhm.
And externally, um, over time, you want to start attracting people that are interested in building, relationships for their own personal and professional, development. So that then leads to your job descriptions. It leads to maybe your employee handbook. What are those things that you can communicate internally that, hey, as a business development centered organization, we know that everybody has their individual jobs and responsibilities to do. And oh my gosh, we would love to help you grow personally and professionally and help us grow by meeting more people and introducing us to your network out there. So the communication piece is big. Um,
Mhm.
the third part of that I would say is training. You're tending to work with a lot of people that might not have basic business development training or networking training, or how do you nurture a relationship and build that trust with someone, like a vendor. So you know formal training around business development, doing things, short best practice things at your all staff meeting, providing materials, just so that constantly you're feeding your team information, how they can be better at that.
Mhm.
And then the last piece is, developing a reward and recognition program, and not just monetary. As I mean, most people want a pat on the back. They just want like the recognition from the CEO
Mhm.
that they're doing a great job and they're helping to move the organization forward. The money doesn't hurt, of course. We all like that too. But so how are we recognizing employees? Is it a monthly all staff? Is it the CEO giving a shout out to everybody that Jill brought in this great lead and that turned into a new prospect. There's lots of ways that we can, recognize employees for doing that good behavior. And so that has to be part of that four-step plan too. But I've seen companies that do it really well, and it makes a huge change in the amount of leads that are coming in and also just staff engagement. Um,
Mhm.
and what leader, what CEO doesn't want to like grow their team and see them out there, even if they are introverts, building their network and building their own, kind of value out there in the marketplace. So it's something I love talking about this stuff because
I
I
can
in my
see.
background, like having led the BBJ, one of my most fun parts was the employee engagement piece and human capital, and how do you motivate and get people to do the right things,
Well, what's interesting that you said what you said, which I didn't even think about, that you're encouraging people to use their personal and their professional. Like there were three. There was the social,
Yep.
the professional, and what was the third?
Social and their personal, your family.
And family.
Yeah.
Those networks. So they're encouraging that because it's all for the better of the company. And the other thing I like that I heard was that first of all, strategy is important because
Yeah.
you can send them, say, go to those meetings, but what do they do there?
Right.
And then the training is so important because how many times have you seen people who don't have the training and show up at networking events and walk up to a group of people and start handing out their business card
Right. Right.
and not realizing that it's all relationship based?
Yeah. Yeah, and a big piece of that, Linda, is as simple as the elevator pitch. If you're a 100-person company and you send out a survey to all those 100 people and ask them to explain what the company does, that would be an amazing, like, just kind of something interesting to do, and see how many people of the 100 get it right. So just that, because even if you're at your daughter's soccer match, or you're at a concert with your friends, I mean, you just never know who you're going to bump into. That might be a decision maker, might be the next good relationship. So the whole part of this kind of BD culture is just to get every employee, or as many as you can, to be thinking about that and keep thinking about top of mind, and know that and get them to understand that this is not a selfish thing. We want you all to bring leads in for us.
Mhm.
No, really what it's about is their own personal and professional development, because these skill sets, I mean, you can use them obviously the rest of your life, the rest of your
Mhm.
career, both, personally and professionally.
And I have to jump on something you just said because it's near and dear to my heart. And you mentioned the elevator pitch.
Yeah,
How
yes.
many people think it's a speech, right?
Yeah,
It's a canned talk that you have to say it, and you're with the CEO in the elevator, and what can you say before you get to the top floor?
right.
But I believe it's shifted so much that it's really a conversation. So hopefully people are learning that at the soccer game or wherever you might be meeting people, it's not just what do I do, but
Yes.
what do you need? And oh,
Yeah.
my company actually does this, and have conversations, not canned pitches. That's part of my bias, of course, that it has to
Yeah,
be.
and that's a great point, and every company should be out there continuing to develop their people on what a good elevator pitch is. I was working with a client this year earlier, and large organization. One of the big pieces was, and gaps, in their, let's just say their team's development and sales, was an elevator pitch. Like,
Mm,
what are we all saying out there collectively that is good, and the same relatively in
mhm,
your own words and stuff. So there are a lot of companies out there that need help with that, and it does really tie back into the BD culture. If
mm,
everybody knows how to uncover the need there, or just ask a couple of questions to understand if that prospect will fulfill that need, then wow, I mean, imagine that. I mean, imagine
mhm.
if you had a 100-person firm, and not just a couple of the principals, and maybe a 10 or 15-person BD sales team, but imagine you had 50 people out there that were saying the right thing and meeting people.
Mhm,
It could
mhm.
be transformative. I mean,
Right. And not just showing up and giving the canned speech, which
exactly.
you hear a lot in a lot of these networking groups where there may be 20 people in the group and everybody has their moment, their highlight to say who
Yeah,
they are.
yeah,
It often sounds canned, and I'm so partial to the fact that you want to sound conversational when you're
yeah.
speaking to people because you need to make that connection with them. You're not there just to put up a sign of what you do.
Agreed. Yeah,
So
and
that's a challenge.
yeah, it's a really good point. It also makes me think about this kind of give to get, and people that know me know I talk about this a lot, and I think that's part of the elevator pitch too, is communicating to whoever it is, whether it's a client, partner, prospect, that you're there to understand them better, to get to know them a little bit better, ask questions before you even start talking. That's why those things, I I get a little anxious actually when like we go around the table and now, all right, what do you do? Tell me who you are, what you do, how you do it. Like, it's
Right.
I'd rather just sit down and have a conversation with you.
Mhm.
Tell me about you first. I want to understand what you need, what you're looking for. How do you work? Who's a really cool person you met lately? Like, that kind of stuff, and really get to know somebody on a relationship level. And, then obviously the need stuff comes in later.
Right. And those situations form much better relationships and are better business development in
Absolutely.
the long run. Because I know more about who John is and what John thinks about things or what he might need. I think early in my career, I knew just what I wanted to say, just what I did. So I was so anxious to tell everybody what I did. Well, maybe they didn't need that service of mine. Maybe they
Right.
needed something different. So why start the conversation with what I can do?
Right, exactly. I agree with you. No, I think that's great. That's great advice.
Now, is there anything else that I haven't asked you? I know you said you could talk hours about this and we could have hours, but are there any other highlights for things that CEOs should be doing to help lead by example and help their company go out there and have better business development?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I wouldn't. That's hard for me to. That's a big question, because I think there's a lot of things out there. I think that having an overall business development strategy is really important too, not just kind of a BD culture plan and that piece of it, but you know, does your company have an overall business development strategy? Because it's hard to show metrics to that sometimes, right?
Mhm.
But in traditional marketing, whether it's digital or email marketing and things like that, you can track the metrics pretty easily. But when it comes to relationship marketing, how can you track that stuff? But there is ways to put metrics to it and find out what's the best return on your investment and time, because there's a lot of activities that you can do, but depending on your business, depending on who your market is, your clients, it depends on what tactics that are best going to work for you. So
Mhm.
I would definitely start there high level and then kind of work your way down to that.
Mhm. Okay. Now, here's my question that I like to ask all my guests because this is, and what I focus on is how to speak, sound, and look like a leader.
Yeah.
What do you think is an essential skill, especially related to CEOs and business development, to help them speak, sound, and look like a leader?
Ooh. So a lot of things come to mind actually, Linda. One thing I would maybe center on a little bit is understanding, who are your best referral partners and who are your best centers of influence. And I say that because I think a lot of communication is involved in there, and
Mhm.
that essential skill to speak, to build relationships, and to be a leader. And so when I think of your best referral partners, when I think of focusing on your best centers of influence, I think of building really deep relationships with those folks and communicating with them and talking to them often. And most importantly, showing them value.
Mm,
Because if you can show those folks value and you're introducing them to people, you're giving them thought leadership, you're going on LinkedIn and liking and reposting their stuff, that's going to come back to you. And I think
mm,
the leadership part of that is then taking that and coaching your team on how they can do the same. So it's kind of lead by example, but then it's also, get in there and teach your executive team how to do these things, because it's a skill set that, everybody definitely on the executive team needs to have. And it really does focus around good communication and building trust and building relationships with these key people.
mm. And the value. I like the value that
The
you
value
mentioned.
piece is huge. Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
John, how can people get in touch with you? Besides LinkedIn, which we're here today on that, how would they get in touch with you?
So my email is john@dinkelbd.com.
Mhm.
So my name and then business development. So john@dinkelbd.com, or you can feel free to call me 443-226-0163. I'm always happy to take a phone call.
Okay, we could always put that in the comments. And for all of you listening, if there are questions or comments, please post them because we will go back and respond to them after this broadcast.
Absolutely.
John, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Hopefully, people will connect with us, ask us questions, and it was so insightful just to hear the business development side of leadership because it's not lost. It needs to start at the top, as you said.
It sure does. Yeah, and thank you, Linda. I really appreciate it. It was fun, and appreciate you reaching out to me.
And I love to learn from each guest that I have. I always walk away learning more things. So it's wonderful. Selfishly, it's wonderful for me, but also for everybody who's listening. And be sure to join us again next week, actually next week, not in 2 weeks, on November 28th, where I will be interviewing Steve Morris, who is a certified EOS implementer. And we will be following this theme by talking about how leadership starts at the top. So until then, let's think about how our CEOs, as well as everybody in the organization, can get out there, do business development, and CEOs should lead by example. Thank you, John.